This is a part that a lot of people have a lot of opinions on, but the fracturing of Xorg into what we now consider these individual Wayland compositors, Wayland window managers, where they're their own. Basically, the entire display stack is each individual project. So, Hyperland is its own stack, Sway is its own stack, Cosmic is going to be its own stack. Obviously, you still have these shared libraries, like WL Root is a shared library that Hyperland uses, Sway uses, so on and so forth. Things that use Smithy, things that use Mutter, like, I guess Mutter pretty much only GNOME uses it, but for the most part, each individual desktop has to implement their own display stack. You don't just have this Xorg thing where you can just focus on the window management component, the extra things you want to do, the status bars, things like that. Now you have to do the entire thing. And for big desktops like KDE and GNOME, and I think this is a big part of the reason why we don't see more. For big desktops like KDE and GNOME, doing this, obviously it took time, it took money, it took development effort. They got it done. And the smaller desktop environments like Budgie, they're getting close. Cinnamon, they have experimental support. There's another one recently that had experimental support. But what do you think about this fracturing? Because I know there was a GitLab issue a long time ago. I believe it's Wayland 233. Wayland 233, which was basically, let's make a Xorg equivalent on Wayland. What do you think about the direction we're going? And do you think this is for the best? Do you think there are some concerns here? Like, what are you gonna say about it?
Okay, so I think that this is the way Linux does things. It's the way it's always done things. Okay, so when they wanted to create a different init system and init setup, there was multiple different ways of doing it, right? There was multiple different projects. When everybody decided that Xorg was old and crusty, which has been old and crusty for basically my entire life, right? There was multiple projects in different directions that they were going. There was Mir, and there was, Wayland it's doing its own thing, and there was a couple other things, and we didn't really know where things were going to go. Eventually, Wayland won. We've done it with package formats, and nothing's ever really won in package formats. And the fact that it's so fractured, we have 12,000 different package managers is just on an offshoot. It feels like the package manager is kind of like that developer's first programming project that they have in university, where it's like a to-do list or calendar application. You get your teething done on a package manager. That's why there's so many of them, but that's beside the point. I think that's just the way that Linux does things, and then eventually something will come along like systemd that will be more of a standard. Yes, there'll be a whole bunch of smaller offshoots that do things a little bit differently, but eventually something will come along that will be more standard. And usually that's the thing that Red Hat backs. Whatever way Red Hat does things, that will be the way it ends up being. But the Wayland thing is weird, right? Because there's so many different small components. Wayland is actually kind of like systemd if you think about it. Systemd is not just one thing. It's many different things that go along, and it's all called systemd.
Sure.
Right? Wayland is kind of the same thing. Yes, there's a thing called Wayland, but you're not just going to use just Wayland. You have to use all these other things. You have to have Xwayland. You have to have, if you're going to use WL roots and all the stuff that goes along with it. If you're going to create a compositor or whatever, it's all a combined thing that's going to happen. And the problem I see with the way Wayland does things, or the Wayland situation such as it is that it's going to be really, from a user perspective, at least, it's going to be really hard for those of us who switch between things. If you just use GNOME, you're going to be golden, right? Or if you just use Plasma, or even if you just use Hyperland, you're going to be fine. But if you rotate between window managers, you're going to be in a world of hurt, because you're going to, just from a portal perspective, none of them use the same portal.
Well, the WL Roots ones do use the same portal except Hyperland.
Right, well, granted, it's not as if you're going to be switching between 5 or 6 of them. There's only like 2 of them that you're going to switch between. But as of right now, there's only really 2.
Sure, they could implement their own portals, that's for sure.
And they probably will, because they're all going to want to do things slightly different. And it seems like portals are the place where a lot of that innovation and workarounds for using things like global shortcuts is actually going to happen,
Mm.
right? That's what portals are for, and that's where a lot of the things that you kind of have to do to get things to work, kind of like Xorg has to, go into that thing. And if you want to create your own compositor, you're probably going to be putting a lot of effort into a portal of some kind. And if it's different, and then people rotate between different compositors, excuse me, window managers, they're going to have a big problem because they're gonna have to switch portals. And here's the thing: is like one of my favorite things about OpenSUSE. It's gonna be really really niche, but with OpenSUSE, they'll let you have multiple portals installed at the same time. It
Mm.
does a really good job of managing those services so that it knows that if you're in, say, Hyperland, you're going to need the portal for Hyperland, or if you're in Xorg, you're gonna, need what that needs. And if you're in KDE Plasma, whatever, it does a good job of switching back and forth. Like if you're on Fedora, though, Fedora will not let you have two of the same installed at the same time.
Right.
It just won't let you do it. It says, would you, if you're installing the Hyperland portal and you have the KDE portal installed, it'll force you to uninstall the KDE portal before it'll run the install the Hyperland one.
Right.
That's just the way that it is. And so switching back and forth, if you're a hopper, you're gonna be probably in a little bit of trouble. But the thing is, here's another problem from my perspective. I'm one of those things where I'm very cognizant of. This is a flaw of mine, that I see everybody as a distro hopper or a window manager hopper, but very few people are much more like you, Brody, than they're like me. Okay, you stay on the same thing for ages and ages. You're very happy with Arch. I'm a distro hopper at heart, so I like to hop around. I'm also that way with window managers. I right at the moment. Let's just go through this. I have KDE installed. I have Hyperland. I have OpenBox. I have Qtile, BSPWM, DWM, River. I'm forgetting at least 3 or 4 of them. I have all these installed on the same machine, okay? And I use them, okay? I hop
Right.
between them. I've used 3 different window managers today, okay? Now, granted, a lot of that was just because I was messing around with Hyperland, and because as you do, you break things along the way. So I had to go into something that was working in order to do things, and it was just easier to use a graphical environment than use the TTY. But
Right.
that's beside the point. I do switch between these things because my ADD happens a lot, and I like to switch between them. But I have to remember that not everybody is that way, because I don't think anybody is that way, except for me. It's just the way that I do it. But I think that when it comes to the fracturing thing, is that for people like me, if there are any others like that, they're gonna have a hard time. And I also, I'm not a developer, but it feels like it's eventually going to cause some problems when it comes to development of the smaller projects, because you're actually, it's already causing problems. So Xmonad's trying to go to Wayland, but the developers who do Xmonad have no clue how to do it. Right? They've basically blatantly said that they don't know how to do a Wayland version of Xmonad, so they're hiring somebody to do it. And one of the reasons why they don't know how is because there's so many ways to do it. I mean, that has to be one of the ways, one of the reasons why, because they could choose WL roots. They could choose one of the other options that exist. They could build their own thing. And once they choose the thing that they're going to use, they also have to figure out how they're going to get the rest of their code base transitioned to that thing there. And that's not easy at all. And if they could come across, I pick on the budget guys a lot because they like to change their mind a ton, right? They were going to go to Qt for a while, and then they're going to go to they scrapped that. They're going to go back to GTK4, and then they're going to do the ICE thing. Now they've decided they're not going to do the ICE thing. Now I don't even know what they're going to do. Now they changed their minds a lot, and I think that the Xmonad guys have the tendency, not the tendency, but the possibility of having a problem like that, because they could go down the road of doing WL roots or whatever. They choose WL roots and find out halfway through that, oh my God, this thing just does not work the way that we want it to work. So we're going to have to start all over again and do the thing again. And because there's so many different changes, there's so many different options out there for this, they could go move from thing to thing and just eventually decide that no, none of this stuff actually works the way we wanted, and then we had to start over, build it all from the stuff. It's just a mess of epic proportions waiting to happen, but it's only going to matter to window manager people because everybody else uses GNOME or Plasma. I mean, for the GNOME and KDE are going to do their things, and it's going to work fine. KDE will be buggy, GNOME will be GNOME, and the vast majority of people are going to use those two things. And the fragmentation, such as we see it as, nerds, isn't going to matter to 99% of the people. Even 99% of the developers aren't going to care all that much. It's all that stuff has to do with the compositors themselves, the window managers. And as much as I would like to see everyone use a window manager because they're functionally superior to any desktop environment out there, I will fight anybody who says otherwise. And I will win that fight. I will take up that banner and I will win that fight. But unfortunately, not everybody does use a window manager.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, because everybody's going to use GNOME or KDE, the fractional stuff, the fragmented stuff that goes behind the scenes isn't going to matter all that much other than to a few developers. But again, I do think that eventually, like, WL Roots seems to be like the thing for the most part that people are going to center around.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's a good thing or not is another conversation because it has so many issues. Also, I don't know if this is just my sense or not, but it feels like the main developers behind WL Roots it feels like they took some of the GNOME juice in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
where they are very finicky about making certain changes that they don't agree with. And if they don't do things in their way, I think it's one of the reasons why there's forks of WL Roots all over the place, because it's really hard if you make, and I can remember, not a developer, but if you make a change to WL Roots and then try to get it implemented into the project, and either you do it the wrong way or they just really don't agree with what you're trying to add, you have no chance. It's kind of like there's a VTE, VTI technology or whatever that goes into a lot of GNOME terminals and stuff. The developers behind that are very anti-change. Yeah, that's it. And they, for a while there, that's one of the reasons why, like, Termite, the Termite, this is like really super nerdy stuff, but they stopped developing the Termite terminal because they couldn't interact with those developers anymore. If WL Roots feels like that sometimes, from some of the stories that I've heard, I don't know if that's across the board or if it's just like small instances or what. You probably would know that better than I would, but it just feels like we're going to center around WL Roots in the compositor land for probably forever, and that's going to be the thing. And maybe or maybe not, that would be a good or bad thing. I'm not exactly well knowledgeable enough to know it.